All right, certainly want to welcome everybody to Western Reserve Safety Council, our first meeting in 2021. We're going to have a great time today. Dr. Gary Allread from The Ohio State University Spine Research Institute is going to be interacting on some ergonomics things we can do to help keep our bodies safe and really focusing on ergonomics, whether you're still out there working, getting back to it, or working from home. I think there's going to be some great discussions alongside of that. As always, we will have an update from the BWC. And as you might see, we do have a poll question in. See how many folks are pulling for the Browns. Wow, I thought we might see some for the Chiefs. So again, who's going to win the NFL playoff game on Sunday? Oh my goodness. This is Believe Land. Oh, we do have a Chiefs fan in the house. Yeah, that's great. So if you're coming on, why don't you vote on that? Some great times for the Cleveland Browns for sure. Okay. So again, we'll have an update here in a few minutes from the BWC. So really good. I was not able to make the December meeting due to some conflicts at work, but sounds like we had a great interaction with Dr. Brown from the Cleveland Clinic. As a follow-up, we'll be sharing something here in a few minutes, some mask information, some details there along with the video. So you want to certainly be ready for that. It also has some information. Those slides, again, are available at the Solon Chamber website. So what you see that we're sharing right now, you'll be able to access and take and use with your team at your site for sure. That we want to make this a great resource for you as well. So again, just welcome everybody to the January Western Reserve Safety Council program. Again, our first of 2021, and Happy New Year to everybody. We'll start here in just a couple minutes. All right. Again, if you're just coming on, if you've not seen the poll, we do have a question about a fairly important football game this weekend. Right now, it's looking like 85% believe that the Browns are going to go down to Kansas City and beat the #1 seed, the overall favorite to win the Super Bowl. How great would that be? And I'm from Minnesota, so it's not even my main team, but I cheer for the Browns just as long as they're not playing the Vikings. I'm pulling for the Browns too, so that's great to see. A lot of confidence in Cleveland, which is great. All righty. So again, welcome to the January Western Reserve Safety Council meeting. Again, we're going to hear in a little bit from Dr. Gary Allread, and Craig Perkins, one of our fantastic steering committee team members, is going to be facilitating the conversation, as he's had some interaction with Gary before. So it should be a great discussion, some great questions to be answered. If you have a question, make sure you put that on the chat, and we'll be sure to either answer it within the meeting itself, or just like we're showing you today, we'll get back with you on certain questions that we cannot answer live today. Okay. I do want to remind everybody, businesses, the PPP loan information and energy savings information on those programs are available on the Solon Chamber website. So again, a great resource. We want to point you toward that. The Solon Chamber is a critical partner of the Western Reserve Safety Council. We work hand in hand, and they do a great job supporting safety, but also a great number of other things, businesses as well. So make sure you check them out. Join us on our LinkedIn group, Western Reserve Safety Council. We do have a LinkedIn page. Certainly would love to get your feedback in any way we can. So please avail yourself of that opportunity. So Tom, if we're ready, can we go to the, we're going to share a little bit of information on the mask, and you can see some details there on the left. We're going to show a short video, and just to give you a kind of like a preview of the video, what you're seeing is you're going to see somebody speaking without a mask, and then you're going to see somebody speaking with a mask, and you're not going to see them but you're going to be looking for like green lights, like lasers that kind of show what's making it through as you're speaking, or what's coming out into the air, and then with the mask. So again, just another visual to encourage good social distancing. So Tom, why don't you go ahead and play that? So again, there's somebody speaking. You can see some of those green dots as he's saying some words. I'm not sure if I'm not hearing the audio, but
I'm going to restart it, Matt, because I was muted.
Gotcha.
Now I'm recording. Stay healthy. Great. Stay healthy. Great. Less loud. Stay healthy. Good. Are you recording? Yeah. Stay healthy. Louder. Stay healthy. Louder. Stay healthy. Nothing.
Alrighty, so again, yeah, just to give us some feedback, that video, there's not a whole lot of video to watch there. There was like basically what they were demonstrating was when somebody was wearing a mask, there wasn't a whole lot of green kind of laser lights coming out, but when there was not a mask, there was more. So again, just another visual way to encourage the wearing of masks. And then you can see on your left the effectiveness of the different types of masks and face covering. So just to encourage you there. Right now, I want to turn it over to Mike from the BWC. Mike is going to share some updates with us. So Mike, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thanks, Matt. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you're all safe and healthy and families are doing well. Just have a few talking points to go over. Dan can't be with us today, so you get me. But just want to let you know, BWC is administering the $28 million air quality program. That's for healthcare facilities, and it will reimburse up to $15,000 for those healthcare facilities that have made air quality improvements. We extended the deadline to March 31st. So if you have made any improvements between March 1st of 2020, and we'll make some between March 31st of this year, it's a great program to get some CARES funding for that. Registration is open for the 2021 Ohio Safety Congress. It is going to be a virtual event, and you can also exhibit products and services if you'd like to do so. Please go to our website and get registered and be a part of that great event. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, I just want to go over a couple things as far as the true up and make sure that everybody has taken care of that. It was for the 2019 had to be done by August 15th of 2020. If you didn't complete that, you probably didn't get your rebates, which would be an awful thing. But also, if you did not do that by November 2nd, you may be removed from some of the alternative rating programs, rebate programs, and so forth. So hope you got that done. Employer Programs is going to be going through that. If you do want to appeal it, you can. You can also perhaps use the governor's one-time forgiveness if you completed that by December 31st. Training requirements, I want to mention for policy year 2020, rating and rebate programs are still required. They're not going to be waived this year. We did waive them in 2019. But all indications right now are they still going to require those training requirements be met. Okay, next slide. For private employers, just want to make you aware that if you're going to be enrolling in any of these programs listed on the screen, you need to do so by January 29th for that policy year 2021, which begins in July. Also for the bonus programs, if you want to be involved in any of those bonus programs for the rebates, make sure you do that by May 31st. You can do it anytime, but if you want to be an ISSP, drug-free, transitional worker, policy activity rebate, do so by May 31st. For Safety Council, as usual, we will allow enrollment up until July 31st. Next. Public employers. Okay, if any public employers out there, your payroll true-up notices were sent out January 1st. One of the important things is to get that true-up done by February 15th, okay? And just want to also remind you that your 300 AP summary of work-related injuries and illnesses needs to be submitted to PERP through the BWC website by February 1st. Next slide, please. BWC monthly employer webinars are still taking place. We do those twice a month. January webinars, one of them was held yesterday, our first one of the month, and then the next one will be Thursday, January 28th at 11:30 a.m. Really a lot of great information there as far as you know, the required dates for the programs and getting all of those different safety requirements completed. We're going to do a review of 2020, mainly talking about things like the rebates and the mask initiative, where we sent out lots of masks to everybody. Hope you got those and you're using them, making good use of them. There'll also be a segment on updates on your estimated annual premium. 1099s for those of you that were asked to complete those, please do that. And then our monthly safety tip, of course, is on effectively managing OSHA record keeping and reporting. And please keep in mind that you know, your OSHA 300A needs to be posted on February 1st. If you need to do the electronic submittal, that needs to be done by March 2nd. And there's just some basic information in that safety tip about how to really effectively manage that program. Doesn't get into all of the details, but some good tips. Next, please. We only have 2 safety webinars in January. One of them has already passed, unfortunately. That was on the Public Employment Risk Reduction Program. But we do have one at the end of the month on for hazmat employers. This will go over some of the things you need to do to stay in compliance. And that will provide credits too for some of the different rebate programs, give an hour of credit for that. We are doing all of our training virtually now, and it's going really well. So if you can attend, please do so. Accident analysis, these are generally half-day classes that we're doing and doing them through WebEx, really trying to make them very interactive, and we've had really good response so far. So take advantage of those. If you need credits for any of the rebate programs or rating programs, that's a great place to get them. Okay. Go ahead. Next slide. And we are continuing to provide our consultative services, although for the last month and a half or so, we were commissioned to help out the Ohio Department of Health with a retail compliance project that we're working on. So we're going out to all retail stores, primarily the bigger box stores and medium-sized stores, and making sure that they're doing the right things to be in compliance with the Department of Health directives for COVID. But we are doing our consultative services virtually. If you would like us to review any of your safety programs or policies, training content, specific tasks or operations, we can do that virtually. So please don't hesitate to call if you have any questions or would like some help with that. A couple of COVID resources here you're probably aware of. We've been advertising those for some time. And then I just have my contact information here. If you do have any questions, I'm a supervisor with safety and hygiene out of the Cleveland office. So I supervise a team of safety and ergonomics and industrial hygienists. So if you do have any needs, give us a call, give me a call personally, and we'll help you out. And thanks again for all you do to improve the safety and health of your employees.
Yeah, quick question for you, Mike. From one of our participants. They asked, how do I get BWC notices for meetings and webinars ahead of time so they can maybe plan for that?
Most of those should be communicated through the Safety Council if you're keeping track of the different email and stuff coming from them. you can also go to our website to find out what's upcoming. In a learning management system, we have a list of all the virtual training and all of the webinars that are being offered. So you can also enroll that way. Yeah, let me know too if you do want me to send out a flyer or anything. Just give me a call or an email, and I'll shoot something over to you to let you know of everything available. So
That's great.
thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate your partnership.
You're
Just
welcome.
want to take
Absolutely.
a moment and recognize our founding sponsors, Cleveland Clinic, Integrity Staffing, Nestle, North Coast Shredding, and then Swagelock. And then our gold sponsors, we got Ving, Zercoa, and Swagelock again. And just appreciate those partnerships. And there's different levels of opportunities to advertise and promote at those different sponsor levels. So if you're interested in that, you want to get your company even more plugged in, we would love to have you and talk to either Tom or myself about sponsorship. That would be fantastic. So at this point in time, we're going to turn it over to Stephanie from Ving. They are our monthly sponsor. And Stephanie, why don't you take it away?
Great, thanks so much, and Happy New Year, everyone. As always, we are thrilled to be able to partner with the Western Reserve Safety Council. For us, we're a compliance and training platform, and we are dedicated to improving safety, compliance, quality, and monitoring for you. I'm just going to do a quick screen share. And is that okay with you, Tom? Let me just see if it's going to go. You know, I don't think it's going to go for me, so that's all right. I'll go back.
Yeah, Tom, are you able to help her share her screen? There you go. All right, sweet.
I'm on the wrong one. Hold it. Sorry. Here I am. Here I am. I just wanted to let you know, to familiarize you with our site. It's vingapp.com. And I just want to go over a couple of things that will really help out. With Ving, you are able to use our safety content that's available to you to be able to help with training in safety and compliance very quickly. You can use your own content. You can create your own messages. And we actually use microburst training as our real hallmark. And that allows you to optimize your training for your viewers to make sure that they are learning and retaining all the information that you want them to have. We also are a resource for you. So we have blogs and posts and lists that you are readily able to use, whether or not you're a customer or someone who's just interested in using our site. So we welcome you to give us a call at any point. My name is Stephanie Hunter, and you can find me at vingapp.com. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders. I want to thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing this talk that's coming up on ergonomics. So important.
That's great. Thank you, Stephanie. You've been a great partner with us. And again, they provide very unique training platform to really leverage digital to get things out to your team members. So certainly avail yourself of that resource. Very quickly, the motto of the month, first one in 2021, is respect the unexpected. Think through your risks. Respect the unexpected. Think through your risks. If you think about incidents and injuries at your site, typically they revolve around something abnormal happening, right? A change in the schedule, the machine didn't work right, didn't have the right workers. And that's where we really need to be applying that risk prediction mindset. So certainly just encourage you to think through that, respect the unexpected. Again, we've got another poll in process now. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Craig Perkins, who's going to introduce Dr. Gary Allread, and we'll get into the program. Craig.
Hey, everybody. Happy 2021. Today, I'm really excited. Obviously, we've actually put together some really nice programs in the last year or so as we've battled with this newness. And this is kind of a nice transition from talking primarily about COVID to a little bit of a bridge of both. So Gary Allread is somebody who I've actually worked with now for, I think we were trying to remember, 5 or 6 years. He's the program director of the Spinal Research Institute at Ohio State University. Don't mind a little bit of his depression today after a couple of days of recovering from their lack of showing up on Monday night. I think speaking as an employer, I don't think I appreciated the capabilities and really the incredible asset that Ohio State could be to us in Ohio. We've partnered with Ohio State and worked specifically with Gary for a range of things. I actually met him when I attended their Ergonomics short course, which is a week-long course that goes over a broad range of topics relating to ergonomics and extended anywhere from specific to workplace application to return to work, and then also something we'll talk about today, which is psychosocial factors of ergonomics. We also partnered with Ohio State and actually had them, a few of them, come on site to do some really interactive and fascinating testing. Maybe one day in another presentation we can show a little bit of a sample of what we were able to do, but where we were able to gather data and put that side by side with video to actually show a person visually in our actual in-house training with how, you know, an at-risk versus a safe condition, and how from a data perspective that looks, and the stressors on their physicality. But today Gary's going to talk a little bit about psychosocial factors of ergonomics, give us a baseline of ergonomics to start, and then build from there. So Gary, it's all you.
Great. Thank you, Craig, and the rest of you for inviting me to give this talk. I appreciate the opportunity, and I've been as Craig said, yeah, we have partnered on a number of things in the past, and I have appreciated his willingness to kind of explore outside the box solutions to ergonomics, and that really goes really along with what I'll be talking about today, looking at this connection between the mind and the body and what we're learning from a research perspective in this issue as a way to further our understanding of how to take ergonomics principles and apply them in the workplace for a number of different benefits. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that at a high level, and then also explaining some of these different exposures in the workplace that we know relate to injuries, and then get into how the body may be responding or not responding to each of these different types of exposures, and then what can we do about it. So next slide. Just to get everyone on the same page here, ergonomics really is a branch of science that's really looking at characteristics of people, what we know people are capable of or not, and also looking at exposures within the environment. Ideally, what we're trying to do is understand what people are able to do or not able to do, and design jobs around those activities. And so if you could advance the slide. When we're looking at worker capabilities and limitations, it could include the obvious, you know, people's size and strength differences. You know, how do people vary, or how are they similar in the workplace, and what influence might that have in workplace design? But we also are doing more work really looking at employee perceptions of the work in a number of different ways. Their cognitive work that they may be doing in addition to any physical work. From an environmental perspective, in terms of the workplace, that's not only the built environment, how are people having to move within a workplace, what are the efforts required of a job, but then also the psychosocial or work organizational influences. And so I'll touch on some of those as well. Now, people apply and use ergonomics for a number of different opportunities and a lot of different objectives. One of the more obvious ones is to lower the incidence of injuries, cumulative trauma injuries or musculoskeletal disorders that might be occurring in the workplace. But there are a whole host of other ways in which organizations can benefit from ergonomics effort. Maybe to reduce fatigue among individuals. This often is the case. We're looking at conditions, and it may not be that people really get injured doing computer work, but the level of physical fatigue that they have may be it may be impacted. Other goals, though, companies often are interested in improving the productivity of their workforce and making it more efficient, and ergonomics can come into play there as well. We also know that there can be cases where a company may not have many injuries, and part of that might be because of the design of the jobs and environment causes employees to leave before they have time to get hurt. Or they may, existing employees may say, I just can't deal with my job today, so I'm going to call in sick. Well, that causes all sorts of issues, and so ergonomics can address those as well. Ergonomics can be used to reduce errors that are being made in the workplace, scrap. We also know that we can improve people's job satisfaction and morale. And the design of the work can also reduce the time it takes to maintain equipment. So there's a whole host of different benefits that we see from ergonomics. So what I want to do is really talk about those different types of categories of exposures and what we know about research and how that relates to the workplace. Now, the more traditional efforts in ergonomics have to do really with focusing on the physical demands of the job. And often we talk about the big three there. The first one would be force, how much physical effort is required to do a job. And in turn, that has an influence on how much internal stress is being put on the body. We also look at postures. We know that the more awkward the posture is that people will do work in, the less capability they have, the less strength they have. And we also want to look at making jobs less repetitive. When humans use their bodies in ways that put stress on the same joints, that physical tolerance to wear and tear comes into play. And so often on more traditional ergonomic assessments, the focus is often on force, posture, and repetition. But what I want to do is I want to take that a little step further and talk about some of these other exposures. We just talked about those physical exposures, but what I want to shed some light on is what we know about the impact of the individual doing that work and the organizational factors, the environment in which that work takes place. Next slide. Oh, and the other thing that I want to mention too, is you could advance a little bit more on this, is that these factors interact with one another. And so there are relationships between the personnel factors that come into play, as well as between the physical and the work organization and the like. And so these are not standalone exposures, but they have a way to interact with one another. And I'll touch on some of that as well. If you go forward, please. There's no set definition for organizational factors or psychosocial factors, but let me give you an idea of what some of those really focus on. One set of these organizational factors is the design of jobs. How complex is the job? What kind of attention or cognitive ability is required to do that job, in addition to the physical demands? Job control. How much do employees have the ability to design work around what their preferences are or in the work design process? Rewards. Do employees feel like they are getting compensated for the level of the work that they put in? Are employees concerned that their jobs may even not be there, in the coming months? Work scheduling is another psychosocial factor. What are those hours, the pace, ability to take breaks when needed? And then also one of the other big psychosocial factors are the relationships between coworkers, between workers and their supervisors, and how much support or lack of support there might be. So those are some psychosocial factors. And so if you go to the next slide, well, this was a question that we might be able to discuss later is, have you had any of these kind of exposures in the, and we could talk about what positive or negative influence those may have had in the work. What does the research say about this in terms of ergonomics? One really interesting article was published a few years ago that found that employees who were getting mixed messages about their job, saying, knowing that this is what I was hired to do, this is what I'm doing, but the job expectations are now different. That role conflict has been found, when it exists, to increase the reporting of employees experiencing soft tissue injuries, strains and sprains. This research also found that when employees felt that they had little control over the job in terms of how they wanted to set it up, what decisions they were able to have in terms of the job design, when that wasn't there, reports of soft tissue strains and sprains increased as well. And finally, this has to do with management. When employees felt like the leadership did not have structured safety prevention programs in place or reward safety, safe methods, then there were increases in these strains and sprains as well. So we see that the research is telling us there's a relationship between these organizational factors and reports of physical discomfort or injury. If you go forward, we also know that employees bring several things to the workplace that has been found to be related to these reports as well. We all are variable. We all vary quite a bit in the workplace. So we have seen that age, gender, strength, body mass index are factors related to reporting of pain or discomfort. We know if you've had a back injury, you're more likely to get hurt again. Behavioral aspects, how much job experience do people have? Do they smoke? There's been research that has shown relationships between all these variables listed on this slide and incidents to discomfort or injury. And also we're learning more about personality and how that relates to injuries as well. And this was actually something I had done for my doctoral dissertation, looking at the personality of individuals and the general sense or personality of an environment in which there is one. And when there are mismatches between those, what I had found, and others are finding too, is that there's more anxiety, more physical discomfort reports, less job satisfaction, et cetera. And it's really a function of how physically demanding the work is as well. So we see that there's these individual factors. If you go forward a slide, we also have seen in other research that several of these individual responses to work have been related to specifically reports of back pain. You would read this slide is that I'll take lack of controls who in this report, in this study had found that individuals, they didn't have an adequate level of control over how they wanted their job to be done were 1.3 times more likely to report back pain than those who thought they had adequate control. People who said they were dissatisfied with their jobs were 1.6 times more likely to report back pain than those who were satisfied. And this is irrespective of the physical nature of the job itself. So some more evidence that these individual perceptions have an impact on reporting. If you go forward. Now this, I think, really relates to the current pandemic. And so this was something that Craig and I have been talking about, and I have been seeing quite a bit too in the literature. This is some of the recent information that's come out related to psychosocial stress. There are physical impacts, as you might expect. For example, employees who may have been laid off maybe become more physically deconditioned. And research shows that even after a few weeks of inactivity, we can lose 25 or more % of our muscle strength, which is going to have an impact on our ability when we go back to work to tolerate the demands of the job. We know the impact of the pandemic has caused some job functions to increase those requirements. Janitors, housekeepers, other individuals who have to do a lot more cleaning, have physically more work that have to be done. So we'd have to account for that. And we've also seen some research with all the different masks that are available, is that there are some masks that really are changing how fatigued people feel or how well they're able to regulate their body temperature. So there we have those issues as well as some mental impact or cognitive impact. Some recent HR surveys have found that over 70% of employees have felt this has been the most stressful time in their careers of any time they've had. And we've also seen increases in prescriptions for antidepressives, insomnia, medications, and those type of things. And also one of the quotes I thought was really interesting that I found said depression, alcohol, and other substance misuse and anxiety have all skyrocketed because of COVID, and it's having an impact on the business's bottom line because people who are not feeling well or are sick are less productive and are more likely to have accidents. I think that this, I have a personal point that I'd like to bring up as well. And I tend to grind my teeth, and my mouth guard that I wear at night has been wearing out more recently. And so I went to the dentist to find out what was going on to get a mouth guard. And the dentist said that their business has exploded because a lot more patients are coming in with ground teeth or broken teeth. And so I think that this whole climate with everything going on in the workplace is having these physical manifestations in ways that we may not see as so obvious. Anyway, I digress. So let me go forward and say that there has been some interesting data that has come out from the National Safety Council, and they have found that since the pandemic that many employers are finding that their injury rates have gone down, their near miss incidents have been reduced, and they think it's because there's been a focus more on health and safety, which makes sense. But this is also saying that it tends to be the case that this focus on safety related to the pandemic is actually taking some focus away from other health and safety needs that an organization might have. So I think we really need to look at the long-term issues that might be coming up with this focus on COVID. So if we can go forward. So let me talk about this connection between what we're seeing in the with the physical nature of work or other aspects of work and how that might impact the body. So if we go forward, I have been talking about in these studies that there have been increases in reports of injury and discomfort and that type of thing as a function of all these different types of exposures. The question is it just people complaining because they don't like how work is going, what their jobs are like, they're stressed, or is there actually a physical response that's going on that might account for this discomfort or this injury or these injury symptoms? And so there are a couple of studies I want to briefly go over that have attempted to try to answer this question. The first one was one that I was somewhat involved in at Ohio State. It really had gained a lot of interest among people. And what we did was we recruited 25 naive college students for this study. Ohio State is teaming with naive college students, and so it was easy to find people for this study. And what you can see in this picture is that we hooked up some equipment to each subject so that we get an idea of how much their trunk muscles, their back muscles were activating as a way to determine how stressed their back might be doing this work. And we had them perform a series of pretty standard lifting tasks, not too much weight, and they lifted at a continuous speed. And what we did was just provide some positive feedback to them saying, oh gosh, you know, you're doing a great job. I'm enjoying this study. Hope you are as well. You're doing a great job. I wish all subjects did as good as you. It would make my job a lot easier. We would make small talk and smile, turn on their favorite radio station, and we collected the data that we needed. And then what happened, if you go next slide, we had an interruption that came in which our boss came in, asked to see us, those who were collecting this data, And there was this commotion going on outside the room where the subject was standing, where the subject could be heard with our boss berating us about that the data is not being collected correctly and you're a horrible grad student. Why did I hire you? All this stuff, nothing directed at the subject, but directed at those of us who were conducting this study. And so we came back in, slammed the door, said, oh, my boss does not like what's going on. We've got to rerun this whole study. We've got to do all the lifting again. So we had the physical lifting repeated, but we changed how we interacted with the subject. We didn't really look at them or establish eye contact. We would frown. We would say, hey, what's wrong? You were doing so good before and now you're kind of messing up, and you got to try harder than you were doing. But we collected exactly the same physical data. It was just the environment in which that was being done was different. And we wanted to see if there was any impact on the body when looking at those two different scenarios. So here's some data that showed the results that we found. The green markers here in this chart show loads on the spine in that more favorable environment, and the red shows those in the less favorable environment. And you can see that some of these overlapped one another, meaning that the loads on the spine were the same between those two conditions. However, some of those, the stressful condition resulted in much higher loads on the low back. So we know that this study is really telling us that psychosocial environment, how the employees or these subjects were doing the work had an impact. And if you go on the next slide, we also looked at personality and whether they were typed under a number of different personality factors using the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And what we found, as this chart shows, is that extroverts had really small increases in the loads on their back in that less desirable environment. But the introverts had much higher increases in loads put on their spines in that less favorable lifting environment. So we can see the responses of individuals can be impacted by their personality type as well. Now, please don't think that you need to go out and fire your introverts in your workplace. That's not really the take-home message from this study. The take-home message is that environment in which we collected the data was not favorable to introverts, where we could probably have found another scenario where the reverse would be true between extroverts and introverts. If you go forward, there was another study that I'd like to briefly mention where it was more of a material handling type activity of different weights of loads, different lifting speeds, and what was being manipulated here was what type of decision making did the employees have to make and how complex was that processing. And essentially, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but essentially the subjects had to either sequentially make decisions or make decisions all at one time while they were doing the lifting, or they had to solve a simple problem or more complex math problem while they were doing that lifting. And so we were manipulating some of the mental loads of the work while physical work was being done. And if you go to the next slide, what we had found was that with more simultaneous decision making, that is a lot more mental activity that was required, there were increases in loads on the back. And if you go to the next slide, we can see that some of the more complex mental processing in a number of different spine loads that we looked at also were influenced by the pace of the physical work, but also how complicated the mental work was while that physical work was being done. And so this was another example showing how other aspects of the work that aren't just the physical work have an impact on people physically. So what do we do about it? So I want to just briefly talk about some methods that can help improve this. One aspect, and that was part of the survey that was put up earlier, was looking at wellness programs that a company has. Is it holistic? Does it cover all of these different type of potential exposures, not only the physical work, but is there psychological assistance? Is there a focus on physical health that can really help benefit all these other exposures that we know relate to workplace issues? Another approach is to making sure that management, supervisors who are working with employees on a much more intimate basis have an understanding of the impact that they can have in making that relationship more favorable, because we know that those type of relationships can increase or decrease the physical stress that employees perceive. And so that can be a real benefit. Another approach is looking at the technology that you use. Are there methods that you have or that you see that could be used in the workplace that reduce the mental complexity of the work that employees have to do, because there's a relationship there between that work and loads on the body. We also can really look at communications and understanding the differences among people, whether those differences relate to age and generational differences that we have between people, whether it's race or gender or sexual orientation. Improving these means of communication can really benefit and help the relationship among coworkers, understanding differences among people. And one of the last things I want to talk about is going back to those buckets of exposures: the physical, the organizational, the individual exposures, and understanding that every workplace and every organization can be quite different in that in some cases it may be totally the physical factors that are driving any kind of exposure, any kind of injury risk in an environment. It may be that you work in an environment where the nature of the work is not problematic, but maybe it's the nature of the workforce. Is it an older workforce? Is it an experienced workforce? And that may be the cause of where there might be some injury or other ergonomics related concerns. Or it could be the organizational aspect of the work as well that might be driving it. And the other thing is, remember, I said that there are interactions between these different environments. And one thing that we have seen, for example, is perhaps you work in an environment in a company that has a lot of really physically demanding work that has no easy solution. Well, it doesn't mean that you only focus on that. It may be that let's focus on how we treat those people, recognizing that, they're doing tough jobs and that we want to acknowledge that and really focus on the psychosocial aspect of that work that can help assure people that they're being taken care of and the management understands the nature of that work and can help in that regard. And the very last thing I want to talk about is just that on the next slide, that one of the most critical things we can do here is to involve employees in aspects of work design, any changes that come about, that time and time again, research has found that you reap a lot of benefits from involving employees as much as possible through empowering them to take ownership of the work. It increases job satisfaction and motivation. A lot of, production employees, for example, they're the experts. They know the jobs better than anyone, and they may have very feasible solutions that can make the job more efficient, safer, and have the workforce more productive. So those are just kind of high-level approaches that I think really relate to some of these issues and understanding the relationship between work and how people respond to it. I believe that is all I wanted to cover. I know there was a lot of information and I covered it in a quick period of time, so there may be a lot of questions. If you have those now, I think there's time for discussion, and my contact information is on this slide as well if there's something you'd like me to follow up with individually.
Gary, thanks for all that information. Hopefully everybody else thought that was just as fascinating as I did. Please do feel free to message me or Tom with any specific questions to ask Gary. I've got a few prepared, but I'll also try to prioritize your questions. There was a question specific to kind of HR policies. I actually think that's a great topic in general for a day, so that might be something we'll pursue for that, to get some HR specific experts to get involved with that. Gary, one thing that I wanted to ask, I'll admit that some of this is selfish, but I'm wondering if other people felt the same, is seeing, so I'll hear of new research, new studies a lot of times through you, through different trainings that I'll go through, and I wish that I could stay on top of that more so. And at times there's different publications, magazines that I'll read those. Is there a good resource that you would suggest somebody who isn't, obviously as deep in sort of the scholarly world as you, to keep up with things that are going to be helpful for us, to, especially the one point you had, to be able to convey to management some of the relationships with, especially from a psychosocial factor perspective?
So what you're asking is, how do you become aware of new research in this topic?
Yeah. How do I hear about the link between, introverts and extroverts, or, gosh, there was another one, whether a person's stressed or not, and how do I become aware of that now, 8 years after it was published in 2012? How do I learn about that sooner?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, I've given an entire talk on that in terms of research for non-academics. I mean, we're lucky at a university as we have easy access to a lot of that research. One thing that you can do is you can use Google News or other search engines, and you can customize or wanting to find that information on. You can put those keywords in, like psychosocial or coworker support, or as specific as you want it to be. And when there's a news item or research item that comes up, it will send you an email and give you links to some of that information. Various journals have feeds that they'll send you summaries of research that's done. I could provide you some links to that based upon that talk that I've given, but I've set up a lot of those, even though I have easier access to them. I've set up a lot of those automatic search programs, and I get on a daily basis summaries of research that's going on, and I can look at it and say, hey, I want to dive into this, or no, it's not relevant to me. So more and more of that information is being available online to non-academics, and often in terms that's a little easier to understand. It's not in all that academic lingo.
Sure. No, that's really helpful. Maybe what we'll do is we'll touch base after, and we can maybe put some things out on the slides the next meeting, but also on LinkedIn. So the specific question that came up, and that somebody from the audience is asking, and I'll tie this to another general question that I had. So specific question is, if you found certain techniques or have experience with how the supervisor or manager can have a good conversation with employees to really emphasize, we're trying to get the work done, but hey, I want to make sure you do this safely. And if there's any work done with that. But specifically, the question I was going to ask, I guess, to add to that is, you guys have that research where you've at least found some relationship between the stressors and general work environment and potential kind of physical impact and less than ideal ergonomics. Are you guys planning to take that research further to say, okay, what types of intervention in this circumstance is going to be most effective?
We haven't done anything specific to that. I think what we have been really focusing on is how to collectively take this knowledge of an understanding of the fact that, you know, those type of work interactions can have an impact, and how do we more holistically combine that knowledge into ways to better assess work to determine its risk for injury or other symptoms. You know, part of you know, what we're trying to deal with is, you know, how do we get something like that funded for something that's that specific? You know, there could be some research out there that others have done. I think that what, you know, we had done along these lines, looking at these links between physical and say psychosocial factors, has generated more findings out there. And so, you know, there might be something along those lines already. I'm seeing a lot more type of studies that are being done, and so there could be something already out there.
Sure. One thing that Gary was alluding to, I don't know how many details to get into, but Gary, not trying to be too self-promoting, but so I'll do it for you. Ohio State, sort of at a high level, has a relationship with a large organization that ultimately is funded by the National Science Foundation, that has relationships with people like us, with companies that are in certain industries that do have critical considerations for ergonomics, and those companies have the ability to influence what type of work and research Ohio State and other universities are considering, and we've had some exposure to that. And I don't know, Gary, if you want to add any more to that, or even talk about some of the topics you guys are working on that might be interesting to the group.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So Ohio State and our group is part of the consortium that's partially funded by the National Science Foundation, but it's really a collaboration between industry and academics. And what our focus is on this specific prevention of musculoskeletal disorders, both primary prevention and secondary prevention. And the research that we do is decided upon by our industry members. So they pay a membership fee, but they get you know, access to all the research that we're doing, and they're the ones who drive the research itself. And so, you know, we've had a number of instances in our consortium here where a company is trying to address a specific question, you know, perhaps something analogous to what Craig was asking earlier. And we have then the funds to be able to study that. And essentially, one company will contribute their funds in addition to all of these other companies that are also contributing, but each company benefits from all that research that's done under the umbrella of this consortium. And so what we do with this particular consortium is to study broad issues that relate to how we can reduce injuries in the workplace, but then we can also have the opportunity to look at more specific workplace issues like what Craig had brought up. And so if you have an interest more about that, then please email me and I'll be happy to provide some more details.
Great. Give me just a second. I'm catching up on some of the questions. Where do you see, so you guys, obviously there's work that's focused on extroverts, introverts, some of the stressors. Where do you see the kind of the next interesting factor within psychosocial factors being researched? What's the next thing that you think is potentially going to be looked into for companies to understand a little better?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is trying to better understand the nature of those interactions. Let's say, you know, you have a workplace that's very physically demanding, but you have incredible leadership, you know, very supportive. What kind of impact does it have in mediating the impact of the physical factors themselves? And so, you know, let's say you have jobs where you're lifting stuff that's really heavy and you may not be able to do anything about that. But given that you can try to focus on other aspects of those exposures, how much of an impact are we able to see from having a more amenable psychosocial environment, more amenable or positive perceptions of the work among employees. And I think there's a whole lot that we have yet to understand. If you think about white collar work, if you think about what experiences we have all had, we think about a career of a librarian or an attorney or a salesperson, or a nurse, they have particular personality types, right? And research has been very clear that individuals who don't have a personality type of what it takes, say, to be a car salesman aren't successful, or they're going to, leave that job to find something that's more acceptable. In the blue collar world, we haven't really seen that too much. Every workplace has its own environmental design. And so often we're not really looking at how well do those employees who are in that environment, or how well are they functioning. And so that's where I'm seeing a lot of efforts being done now, is understanding better that environment and how we can help tailor it to people who have different views about what work should be.
Very interesting. I think it is, it feels, I know here, and I think I've seen in general, so much more emphasis on, and these are kind of tangentially related, but adult learning theory, and really understanding how people learn, but as well as obviously the mental stressors of the world, and putting all that together really comes down to understanding how the brain's working, how to motivate, how to incentivize, and all of those things culminate into some of the challenges we face with ergonomics as well. So it'll be interesting to see where the research goes.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're, so many more academics are looking at this factor, because I think we've underestimated just the power of the mind in this particular sense, and how it can relate to these physical manifestations of stress that can lead to cumulative trauma.
Sure. Gary, you made a comment that, to be honest, I wasn't aware of the National Safety Council's study. I wish I had been, relating to, or that incidents had reduced, which I would be curious if this group's seen that. I think we put a poll out actually within the last couple of months to that note. But my guess, Gary, is that you had mentioned, while that's great from an acute standpoint, from a long-term perspective, as an ergonomist, you have some concerns. Is it more about MSDs, other things that are more kind of long-term silent killers that you potentially see? And if that's the case, is there anything that if you were one of us, what you would be doing right now to potentially mitigate some of that's occurred over the last 10 months?
Well, I wasn't familiar with that survey and those results until I decided to look into what might be going on more recently, and that's where that came up, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And actually, I've had a personal experience with that as well, with one of our other projects, where a large company came to us and they were seeing exactly the same thing. As soon as COVID hit and a lot of workers shutting down, their employees were, it was going on, but their injury rates went down dramatically, and they were trying to understand why. And I think that what they're finding too is very analogous to what the National Safety Council was finding, in that there was this big focus on safety, but a different aspect of safety. And so I think that focus helped, as you were saying, in the short term. I think that part of it goes, in terms of what we could do long term, really goes back to the whole, I don't want to say take a village, but if we talk about employee participation, and how important that is, making sure that the environment in the workplace is allowing multiple stakeholders to participate in, awareness of exposures that maybe leadership doesn't quite see, take responsibility and ownership for making some of those changes that might not be able to be addressed perhaps at the management level. And so I think it really goes to some of those points that I made at a high level at the end of the presentation, is that, it takes multiple people to have that responsibility to, address the safety and health of the organization.
Sure. No, that's really helpful and so true. So one of the questions that came up, and I think I'm understanding what is ultimately getting at, especially employees who've been with a company for a long time, a couple of decades plus. There's a safety in general, ergonomics especially has evolved tremendously even over the last 20 years, let alone 30, 40 years. You still run into challenges where an employee is either not willing, the question or the word that the person who asked the question used was not being open, or not having the openness, not being comfortable with having conversation. Also resistant to change. Have you seen this is somewhat of a tangent off of the research you did, but have you seen any particularly impactful techniques to help folks like that really open up a bit more, and to be more comfortable saying, hey, I'm not very comfortable with this part of my job, instead of sort of the old approach of, I'm just going to put my head down and do this work?
How do I answer that? I think that if we talk about some of the generational differences there for longer term employees, or for those who are the Gen X's and the baby boomers, what I have seen, and I have a colleague who does a lot of that work for organizations, is a better understanding of, if we're talking about generational differences here, a better understanding of what drives each of those generational groups. How do they make decisions? How do they respond to it? What does it take to have them learn about the job, about technology? And I think that knowledge about not treating everyone the same, but saying that one generation, they have different perspectives on the job, they learn differently than another generation, that knowledge and awareness, I think, can really help determine how to get the information you want from them, and how it could improve the chance that they might be more interactive to discuss work related issues.
So there's one more specific question, and Gary, I know this is a topic in itself for sure, working from home and ergonomics. So I'll ask this question maybe in if you had a 30-second or an elevator pitch to a person who all of a sudden, as many people had to, are working from home tomorrow for a really long time, would you say, hey, make sure you focus on this?
So that you're able to work productively at home with what you have?
Comfortably. Being productive is a whole different ballgame, but more to make sure that physically you're not having more of a negative impact on your body.
I think that where I would start is making sure that you're as comfortable as possible and your body is supported. So it really starts with the seat or the chair that you're in, not being, in your Barca lounger, but supported, so that you're letting the chair keep, all that support, and you're not having to do that, the feet are supported or on the ground, that type of thing, and then work out. Because if you're sitting uncomfortably, if you're in a chair that has pressure points, for example, then the rest doesn't matter so much. But if you can, make sure that you're physically supported and comfortable, that's going to go a long way at then ensuring that you can be more comfortable throughout the rest. And then you start working on, hey, where do I put my keyboard? Where do I put my monitor? How do I design the rest of my workplace? So there's no easy, quick answer to that, but to me, that's where I always start, is let's get people comfortable and supported, and then go out. And that's not going to happen if you're sitting at your, at your bar chair and on the kitchen island, or, on your bed.
Sure.
The other thing that I think also I would say is that move around. Maybe you want to kick back and be in your recliner, which is fine. Just don't do it all day. Take an opportunity to mix up your posture so that you're providing some relief to some parts of the body while others do the work.
A good quote that I heard saying is your best posture is your next posture.
Absolutely.
Basically saying keep them moving.
Absolutely.
So the last question that came from the group was just clarification on whether your sweater is crimson or scarlet colored. Hey,
it's yeah. Well, it's supposed to be scarlet, but hey, I didn't think Ohio State would get to where they were. Alabama was obviously the better team on Monday night, so hats off to them.
Hey, we're all of our energy is going towards the Browns right now. So.
Oh yeah, me too. Let's see how far they can get.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot, Gary, for your time. This was really informative. If anybody does have any specific questions or wants Gary's contact information, feel free to reach out to Tom, me. Gary also provided his information, and we'll definitely get you more. We'll also follow up with any of those links or the helpful resources that Gary mentioned. But this is terrific, and hopefully everybody felt like it was a nice bridge between kind of newness of COVID versus more of a longer term prospect and topic to look at. So thanks again, Gary.
You're welcome. Thanks for the attention, everyone. Take care.
All right. On behalf of the Western Reserve Safety Council, as well as the Solon Chamber, thank you, Gary, for this. This was fantastic and super informative. Learned a ton, and it's my hope that participants, were able to look at ergonomics a little differently and all the factors that play into it. Several people asked questions. Are the slides available? And those are available at solonchamber.com/slides. I know we moved away from COVID newness, and we're going to go back in February, and then we'll go back off it again in March. We've got an update from the Cuyahoga County Board of Health just on vaccines and the path forward, rather than hearing, we're straight from the source. Here's where we are, here's where we're going. How are we masking up? How are we doing stuff? So that's going to be Wednesday, February 10th. And another question that came up today that, and we'll send a follow-up resource, is related to HR policies, handbook stuff, and that may be a panel in our March discussion. But in the meantime, we may reach out to folks and see if they'd be willing to do some best practice sharing on their policies as related to that. So super excited. If you're hiring, we've got our job board. And if you're a chamber member as well, we've got information about maximizing your membership. Once again, a huge thank you to Dr. Allread for doing this, and for Craig for your masterful facilitating ability and asking that last question, because I certainly was going to if you did not. And thank you to the person who sent me that question. They will remain nameless in case they apply to you, Gary, for some funding. You don't want to know where their ties are rooted. So thanks again, everybody, for participating today. This will conclude the program. Feel free to reach out to myself or Craig if you have any questions, further follow-up information, and we hope to see you soon and at a future program. Thanks, everybody.